In this episode, I'm going to show you how to colour your parts, even if they aren't designed for multicolour printing. First up, I'm going to briefly cover how you would go about setting up a multicolour printer in Prusa Slicer, but I don't want to hugely go into it in this episode because honestly, it's kind of not always that easy or standard. In this video, I'm going to be primarily using the Sovol SV04 IDEX because it's what I have. If you have any other printer like the Bamboo everyone's talking about, or another MMU, or the Rabbit thing, the Voron, the instructions are likely to be largely the same, although I haven't used those. But Bamboo Slicer is based on Prusa Slicer, so it will presumably have all these functions, and Super Slicer, just the same, it's based on Prusa Slicer. So the basic methodology with multiple extruders is to set them up as tools. That's the terminology you need in the slicer, as they're done that way in the firmware. At least as far as Marlin is concerned. It doesn't matter if you have a mixing nozzle or an IDEX or a multi-material unit, each colour will be set up as a tool, and that in Marlin is numbered T0 to Tn, where N is the highest number of tool, and it would appear that standard Marlin goes up to 6, which means 7 tools because it starts at 0. And of course for an IDEX, that's T0 and T1. If you haven't already got a Prusa Slicer profile set up for your multicolour machine, then this can be the principal pain in the backside, because it means you have to figure out the actions that are needed when swapping tools yourself. I could show you mine here for the SV04, and I will share this somewhere, but it usually involves bespoke commands for your printer. Commands like T with a variable for the next extruder. As we can see here, this switches up one extruder, and I'm personally not sure how that works if you have more than 2 extruders. Can you pick one specifically, or do you just keep increasing? I don't know. But maybe someone can tell me in the comments. And you have commands to retract before moving, to effectively do a Z-hop to move the head upwards, to cool down the extruder that you just used, and to get the next one ready. It's not that difficult, but you need to know how to do it, and it's quite tricky to get it to work well if you don't already have examples to work from. But once you have that code in the tool change section, then you are good to go, and we can start looking at actually making coloured models. Now, I'm intentionally in this video not including the method of making 2-colour G-code that uses models that are pre-sliced, that you download from, say, Thingiverse or whatever, that are pre-sliced for IDEX. And that is because I don't typically use Prusa Slicer for these, because I personally use Cura. But this is essentially something that you would do at design time and not slice time. A perfect example of this is the truck here, which is amazing, by the way. I keep showing these in my videos because they are really cool and they print really well. The normal version is available, which I will colour in a minute. But if you look for it, there is, he's made an IDEX version, and you'd use that. And because it's split into pieces already for you, you just assign the colours to the parts and you merge it and it goes into the centre of the bed. This video isn't about that. This video is about the models that aren't intended for multi-material printing, but we want them to be. Before we can actually paint in multiple colours, we have to actually create 2 filament colours in the slicer, and this is done in the filament section here. For just multicolour, you need to pretty much clone the usual material you use, be that PLA or whatever, and saving it under a new name, and you just change the colour then. And this is entirely the visual colour on the screen. It has no bearing on the actual colour you load into the machine. It's not even typically stored in the G-code unless you have thumbnails, but we won't get into that. On the Plater tab, you can then choose the second extruder to be using the second filament colour, effectively. You can, of course, use this for a second material. I've done that. It's the same process. So we can get on to the actual colour changing part. Finally. The first and my favourite way to do this is by using Prusa Slicer's built-in material paint settings, and this is unique to Prusa Slicer and of course all the forks of Prusa Slicer, so hopefully Bamboo does it, I don't know that. Super Slicer I still haven't used, but I'm told it does. It's this icon on the bottom left, and it brings up a fairly simple menu. And by default, you use your left mouse as a paintbrush for the first colour, and you use the right mouse button as the second colour, and you just basically start scrolling on the part, and that will be what prints. There are essentially 3 modes, and the simplest one is Smart Fill, at least in my opinion. This allows you to change colour by faces, pretty much. I don't want to hugely drill down into the settings here, because they're pretty simple. You can kind of get the hang of them in a couple of seconds. It would waste your time. But there is a thing that you do need to know about, which is you can change the angle you're viewing from, and clip which is invaluable for colouring the inside faces of awkward things or parts you can't normally get to. With some attention to detail and some time, you can pretty much paint anything about as well as you would be able to in real life, I think, with this tool, which is why I personally like it. The downside of this tool, though, is that it is imprecise in terms of the inside of a model, and I'll show you what I mean. I can paint this thing, and when I slice it and I look inside, this generally isn't an issue, but the inside is a different colour. The next two ways do avoid this problem, assuming it is a problem, which I guess it could be if you're printing anything white or translucent. Method number 2 is to split the part out into pieces, and that is something Prusa Slicer can attempt to do automatically, with heavy emphasis on the word attempt. In my opinion, it's actually pretty good at it, considering what it's got to work with, but it has to be able to figure out where the individual parts of an STL are, which is kind of like a thing that's not defined, because an STL is a huge cluster of triangles. I mean, there's some clever stuff going on here. The bottom line is, if your model looks like it's made of pieces, then it probably will work, like it does here. You can split out into objects or parts in Prusa Slicer. That's why you've got an O and a P in the menu. The difference, as far as I can tell, is that one of them creates sub-bits of the model which exist and can be coloured, and indeed they are actually automatically coloured, and that's the P option. But these parts cannot be separated from the body of the model. The model still remains as a whole piece. Whereas the O option splits the part out into objects, is as if you've imported them as different STLs, which you might not want to do, as the model is just going to fall to bits if you try and move it or resize it. Both options can be used though, and both give you parts that you can choose to colour. And when you slice it, you can see that these are whole objects of a single colour. Interestingly, this seems to be the only method that shows the colour when you're not sliced or in the print menu, so this could be easier for someone who loads in the file to be able to instantly see that it's painted. Which, by the way, leads me on to the next point I should mention. Painted models absolutely can be saved. You save them as 3MF files. I've talked about 3MF before, and I don't think it's necessarily a good idea to share 3MFs or to download them and open them, but it is definitely a great idea to use the format yourself as a save file, especially for things like this. The final method, and you can mix and match, by the way, you can actually colour in, you can paint part of a model and then you can colour in another part with a different way. But the final method is to use modifiers. Right-click on a component, it doesn't work on multiple parts at the same time. Modifiers are modifying a single component, so that's not even a part, that is a component, which kind of seems to be interchangeable with the word object. And choose a modifier. You have shapes and a gallery, they all work. Position it and choose the extruder. It's pretty simple. This is a really cool way to add, say, a coloured symbol to a part, like here. You can even load in your own STLs since about version 2.4, I think, of Prusa Slicer, and you can use those as modifiers, which means you can use your own models to paint your own models. Absolutely wild. So that is at least most of how you use Prusa Slicer to colour or paint your parts. I personally think this is a game changer for multicolour printing, as it opens up the option of multicolour printing on existing models that many of us, self-included, will never have had the skill to create or edit ourselves. As always, comment below and let me know what you think. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.